Hey folks, and thanks for joining me as I start this journey down this Mitsubishi A6M Zero Fighter by Agora. This one's going to be a lot of fun. I've seen the action that this thing can do off of its base. This thing will look like it's flying and banking and taking off and landing. This thing is going to be so much fun. So the first thing we're going to be doing in stage one is putting the propeller together. And the first thing we're going to do is give you this little screwdriver, which you can just throw in the trash can because we don't need it. Any other screwdriver will probably work better than what they give you, but I will say it's still nice to have it if you don't have a screwdriver already at your workbench. And until you get a new one, you can go ahead and use that one. It'll work just fine. And the first thing is we're going to set these parts in place just to test fit them, and then we're going to come back and actually put some CA in place and glue it down. And then once we do that, I'm going to put this other little piece on, and this is all parts for the propellers. So I actually have a little plastic gear that's going to go in there. That's what we're dropping in. That's a little gear that's going to actually connect to the propeller gears here after a little while. So you can see I just dry fit those first to start, pull them back apart, apply a little dabs of some thin CA, and then put this down. Now typically I do use thick CA, but because these were little tiny pools of areas where it's actually going to mount fast, I use thin. And you can see if you ever get a little bit too much extra, you can use just a cotton swab to clean that up. And we're going to set that in place, and that'll cure up pretty darn fast. So you can see we still already have our gear in the middle there, which is really nice because that's again where our propellers are going to actually attach. They're going to set in there, and then that's actually the gearing that'll turn them. So they give us a nice little set of jigs to set the propellers into to line them up. So just a little bit about partworks if you guys aren't familiar with this. So this is by Agora. So this is the first Agora model that I'll be ever putting together, and they're a little bit different than Fan Home, which used to be D'Agostini. So the little bit different thing between the two is that the Agora Models is modeling first. So in other words, they are focused on the model building process and not about the brochure. I wish to call it a brochure, like a information that comes with the kit, which is usually like more information about the model, and then you get a little bit of instructions. These guys are more focused on building the model. So their subscription setup is 12 months base, so you get a pack every month. You can do a 24-month option, but you'll still get a pack every other month then instead of every month. So either way, the packs are really full of stuff to do. So this is all in pack one. Just a little bit about that. So if you want to check out this build and maybe get involved yourself, maybe you want to build it or just interested to see what else Agora has to offer, definitely go check out their website. I'll leave a link in the description to Agora, specifically to this model. They have a lot of cars and stuff if you're into cars in 1/8 scale. This one specifically is going to be the Zero Fighter in 1/18 scale, which is very massive for an airplane. It'll have a 2-foot wingspan. So going back to the build here, we do have the propeller coming together. You can see we laid the propeller blades into place using that jig, and that lined up the gearing for us. And then we screwed this plate on the back to hold everything in place. And if you take notice, I'm using 3-in-1 oil because we are screwing into metal. So these are all metal parts that we're screwing into here in the front, including the propellers. They're metal as well. So you can see in this, on the inside, you can see that gear. So I had mentioned it's for the propellers. It's not a gearing to make them spin. You can see it doesn't spin, but actually allows you to adjust the angle of the propellers, which I thought was pretty neat. So we're going to see that here in just a moment, where we can actually turn the propellers, like twist them, and they'll all twist together, which is a feature of this airplane. So again, this is a subscription, so every month you get a pack in the mail, and it has more parts to continue on the build. So what you need to build partworks is a screwdriver, some CA glue. As you see, I would recommend having thick and thin, and really you can get away with just that. I would recommend having some tweezers as well, but you can get away with CA glue and a screwdriver, like CA glue and a screwdriver. Tweezers would be helpful too for some of these small parts like this. Now I will say this Zero Fighter, again by Agora, this is really nice. It's got got some really good quality to it. There's a lot more metal parts, I feel, than some of the fan home builds I have. And that's not saying fan home's bad. I'm not saying that whatsoever. I do enjoy their builds as well. There's just a different feel about Agora models. So if you look at their instructions too, their instructions are extremely detailed. They go into so much more detail than what our other groups' documentation goes into, right? I keep calling them brochures, but they're more like info documentaries, because it's like a lot of information on the model you're building. But in this case, Agora is just instructions. They're really just explaining how to put the model together, which is really nice. So you can see we have this other piece to attach. We're just using a little bit of thick CA here to bring this part together. So, and that's a propeller, and we should be able to spin it here in just a moment and actually see how those blades interact. If I'm not going to do it now, we will do it soon. You'll be able to see that just to make sure they work. So here's our nose cone for over top of that to cover all that inside up. So we put all those parts on just to cover them up, which I know sounds a little funny, but it's one of those things where we know it's there, it looks good. We're not going to be covering too much up, and actually we're going to be looking at the engine cowling here in a little while, and you'll actually see the design that they use for the engine cowling is really nice. You can easily take it off and show it off and put it back together, which actually gave me some ideas for my interior tank builds. So if you're not new to my channel, you know that I usually do armor builds, but I've been wanting to get into airplanes a little bit, so I saw this opportunity to build a partwork airplane that has a lot of electronics. There's a lot of little servos and motors in this thing to make it do all sorts of cool stuff, which I thought was really neat, and that's actually why I got interested in it. And for those of you that don't know, the Zero Fighter is the airplane that was used during the bombing of Pearl Harbor and the attack on the U.S. by the Japanese early on in World War II, or I should say midway through the war. So that's why this is a very well-known airplane. So we can see once we attach everything, we can see our propellers have just a little bit of give to them, and that's because in this next part we're going to show you how I twist them, and then you can see how they all turn together, and this is a little test. So there you go. You should be able to twist one of the propellers, and they should all twist in the same direction. That's how you know you have it set up. Moving on to the next stage, we have a piece of the engine cowling, and we're going to start building up the engine cylinders. So that silver piece in the top right corner is exhaust. We're just going to set that on the side for now, and we're going to attach that later, but that's part of the exhaust structure. So that's later on in the engine build. But essentially from here on out for a couple stages, we're going to be focusing on building the engine. And how these cylinders go together is there's two pieces, there's two pegs in each piece that line up, male and female, and we CA glue them together. Each engine has a total of 7 cylinders. Now each of these cylinders has a label on it. You notice those first ones there were labeled D, okay, and there's also ones labeled B and A, and I think there's even C, so A, B, C, D. I'm pretty sure there's 4 different kinds. And the reason for that, it does matter. It's very important to note which one's which. And you'll see that how easy it is. They have it labeled in multiple areas, so you really can't screw it up. Now on the tops of these cylinders we have these little caps to put on, and now we have lines that will fit into these later, and I'm assuming those are fuel lines that are going to fit into this thing later. And what we're going to do is make sure that the opening for those lines is on the outside of the cylinder. So if you look right now, it'll be on the left hand side of that cylinder that we're looking at. You can see this one here is facing to the right. There's a little peg on there. We just apply a little CA, attach our part, and then you'll see you can clean it up with a cotton swab like I've told you guys before. But you'll see that the opening there is going to be facing the outside. So you're always going to have those facing away. That's going to be very important for later when we do attach all of these cylinder heads together, as you can see. And you also notice there's a nub there sticking up. There's a reason for that. So make sure you pay close attention when you see the letters on the bottoms of these cylinders. Depending on which way I turn it, you can see the letter on there. I'm just showing you those cylinder ends. So here we have 3 more. You can see these are all the same as well. Now again, these guys do a great job. Agora does a great job on noting all these spots. So if you take notice to this plate, this is what's going to hold all the cylinders in place. You see C's and D's, and on the bottom of each one of these is a matching letter. So on the bottom of the cylinders, you'll see C's and D's. So the D's go in the D spots, the C's go in the C spots, and you have a little peg there to line it up, so that way we know it's in the right spot. So again, it's kind of hard to screw it up as long as you pay attention to the lettering. And I've found that this is true throughout the stages, that there's almost always some kind of way of making it so it's foolproof, whether that's different sized pegs or in this case the lettering. Moving on to the next stage, we're going to continue with this same engine that we started. So we have more cylinders, we have pieces of the frame of the engine cowling, and we also have this rubbery piece, which again is more, I'm assuming, fuel lines or air lines, one of the two coming in for these cylinders. So again, I'm just showing you, you can apply some CA on one piece, attach it to the other side, and this is repetitive, so that's why I'm not going to show you every single cylinder going together, but you can see how everything just lines up and snaps together. Just apply little dabs of CA to hold it in place, just like we did on the last set. And you can see now this cylinder does not have any nubs on those silver pieces on top. We're still going to apply little dabs of CA and attach those tops of those cylinders. But take notice again how the hole that you see there is on the outside. So on the side, we don't want it on the inside because we're eventually going to attach some parts to that. In pack number 2, we're going to see those parts come in. So we're going to apply some CA, stick these down in. Now if you see any kind of burrs or anything that prevent that from sitting flush, you're going to want to sand them off. I did come across a few like that. I don't remember if I recorded it though, but just a side note, you can just take a standard sanding stick that you'd use for a plastic kit and sand down these metal parts. It'll work just the same. So in case you do come across any burrs, I do recall coming across one burr that wouldn't allow that silver part to set, but I don't remember if I captured it. So here you can see we have 5 of those 7 cylinders, and again they're all labeled. They're just setting in place for now, not glued fast. We don't want to glue them fast till way later. Moving on to the next stage, we have the other half of the engine cowling. We have a piece that goes in the engine cowling, and then we have some more lines for inside the engine. More cylinders. Again, we're just going to continue building up the engine for quite a while. We have a lot of cylinders, so all in all, if we look at this setup, we have a total of 7 cylinders per ring on this radial engine, but there's a total of 2 rings. So here we can see this is a C, so this will finish off what we worked on before. So there's a total of 14 cylinders that we're going to build up to build this engine. So this is the first piece, right, the first round of the radial engine, and then we have a second piece that goes around as well that we will start up here in a couple stages. But you can see I just built up those cylinders, we're setting them in place. It kind of looks like where we were last time, but really I'm just setting them in place so you can see how they all come together. And here is that engine cowling. So I like what they did here is there's a little magnet. If we look on either side, there's a magnet on the edges, and then there's a magnet that matches on the top of, well actually this is the top of the engine cowling, the other piece is the bottom. And you can see how they'll eventually go together, but first we got to snap fit this piece into place. You can see there's a bigger peg and a smaller peg. Again, it's kind of foolproof the way they did this, but we are going to apply just a little bit of CA first to make sure that it sticks in place and doesn't come out later. So just apply a little CA, then stick this part back in place. I like to dry fit things before I CA, just in case there's any fitment issues. It's probably more so a habit I've developed from building so many of these interior models for tanks. You kind of learn that you got to test fit things first, or else it can be catastrophic if you go to glue them in and they don't fit right. So in this case, everything fits really well, and you can see there, it looks really good. We got holes all the way through there. Just love the way that looks. And then I'm just going to put this together. You can see that magnet I was mentioning, and then there's the other side. Just line them up and they go together real nice. I just love the way that goes together, and it makes me think, how can I do this on my interior tanks so I can pull the top armor plates off and make them snap right back in. Just food for thought for me for future builds, because that's such a nice way to be able to show off the engine later on during the build. You just snap that engine cowling off and put it right on back to be able to show off that engine. So moving on, we have those 2 cylinders built. Now we have enough cylinders to complete one of the 2 7-cylinder engine parts, I guess. Because I guess if there's 2 parts to it, it's still just one engine, right? No different than having 4 blocks on each side of a V8. So here we have 7 cylinders. So again, I'm no radial engine expert, I'm no airplane expert, I'm an armor modeler, but I think this is interesting. And I do know for a fact that there were a lot of tanks, especially early on in the war, mostly American ones, that actually had radial engines in them. So like the Shermans and the M3 Lee and the early Shermans, they all had radial engines in them. So it still intrigues me to put airplane engine in a tank, but I digress. So you can see how we have this retaining plate that goes over top. It just sets in there like so. You notice we didn't glue anything down inside there, and it's going to ask us to screw this retaining plate on. Now it does line up with the hole on the front half of that retaining plate for the cylinders. There's also a peg there to help you line it up. So again, Agora did a great job of trying to make this as foolproof as possible for us. I will say it does get a little finicky at times with some of the stuff later on in later stages, but so far in this build everything has been pretty nice to put together. So as we're looking at this cylinder, what I'm doing is grabbing the screws out, and I'm getting my 3-in-1 oil here to dip into, because we're doing metal on metal contact. We're just going to screw that in place. As I've mentioned before, get yourself a good screwdriver if you can. I did not have a really good screwdriver at the time of this filming, and I was actually using the screwdriver from the Iron Man fan home kit. So definitely see if you can find yourself a better one than these to start, because they just don't have a lot of grip to them, and you can really get cramps in your hands very fast from pounding a lot of screws into these partwork models. Because again, as I've said before, there's a lot of screws, a little bit of CA glue involved with these, so you're gonna have to get used to putting a lot of screws in. You can see there's still a little bit of wiggle there, so I just snapped that to make sure they're all seated well before tightening again. I will note that eventually they'll ask you to take these screws back out to attach all the cylinders together, but I found that it's not necessary. So just a little insight for what's to come in the next pack. So that being said, we can set this piece down and move on to the next stages, which will be again just continuing to build parts of this engine. So you can see we're also going to have some parts left over, like that exhaust piece in the upper right corner that I had mentioned. So here's our next stage, and I think this is the last stage of the first pack if I remember right. So this is going to be starting the second half of the engine. So remember, I said we have a total of 14 cylinders to make. So far we've made 7 and put them together. Now these are A's. Remember I said there's A, B, C, D? The first engine was all C's and D's. The second engine is all A's and B's. These have slightly different nubs on. This is where I came across the burrs on the A cylinders. So here you can see it's all A's and B's. I know for a fact, I think I had 3 different A cylinders that had burrs on, which you can see there's only 4. So 3 out of the 4 had a burr on that I had to remove with a sanding stick because that top plate that I was putting on would not seat correctly. So again, just like before, we have these little connecting hoses. We're just going to snap them off with our flat pair of nippers. So this is only one side is sharp, the other side is flat. That helps us give a flush cut. Just going to cut those parts off, and we're going to start gluing those in place. So these are actually going to go onto the first part of the engine that we started. So we're going back to the first 7 cylinders. And what I'm doing is I'm applying a little bit of CA on the end of these, stick them in place. But here I'm just dry fitting to make sure they fit and that they bottom out right. So a little trick for doing these pieces, because they really, to me as an armor modeler, they feel like handlebars, grab handles on a tank. put a little CA in a dish. I have a designated dish on my workbench for putting super glue into. Just dip the ends of this little hose into the CA and then stick it into the holes. So I just wanted to say, as I'm putting these in place, we're going to put all 7 of them together. So I just want to take a moment to say thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, because this is the last step of this stage. Please like if you like what you saw today. Subscribe to see more, because I have 11 more packs to go after this. Again, thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed this content. Leave me a comment down below if you have anything to say or have any questions. And again, thank you so much. We'll see you next time for stage, actually pack number 2.